It was just another morning. The world was still quiet, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when the knock at the door shattered the calm. It wasn't the normal kind of knock you hear from a visitor or a delivery man. No, this one was more urgent. It felt like someone was demanding to be let in. I glanced over at the clock. It was just after 8 a.m. Not early enough for anyone to be here unannounced, but still, the sound of the knocks felt out of place. The routine of my life was never interrupted like this. My fingers tightened around the warm ceramic cup, but I reluctantly set it down, feeling a sense of unease creeping into my chest. I stood up slowly, walking towards the door. The stillness of the morning had been replaced with a quiet tension, one that I couldn't quite place. I was the only one in the house. My husband had left earlier, as he always did, for work. It was the usual predictable day. Or so I thought. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect. The knocking had stopped, but I could still feel the presence of someone on the other side. My mind raced through the possibilities. Maybe it was a mistake, perhaps it was someone selling something, or maybe a neighbor who needed help. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door, ready to face whoever stood on the other side. I swung the door open, and for a moment I just stood there, frozen in place. The woman standing in front of me looked like she belonged in another world, a world far removed from mine. She was dressed in a sleek, black dress that clung to her form perfectly. Her hair was styled flawlessly, her makeup applied with precision. Everything about her radiated confidence, like she knew exactly who she was and where she was meant to be. I couldn't place her. My heart began to race as I tried to figure out who she was, but nothing about her was familiar. It wasn't the face of a neighbor, not someone I recognized from the block or even from my husband's work life. She wasn't anyone I had ever met before, and yet, there she was, standing in front of me, staring directly into my eyes with an air of superiority. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick, heavy with unspoken words. She didn't smile, but her lips were curled in something that resembled a smirk, not a friendly one, but something more mocking, more deliberate. "Hello," she finally spoke, breaking the stillness. Her voice was smooth, almost too calm. "I'm Claire, your husband's new wife." My entire body went cold at her words. The ground beneath me seemed to shift, as if the world had tilted ever so slightly. I couldn't process what I had just heard. New wife. My mind scrambled to understand. There was no way. My husband. He had to be joking. There had to be some mistake. But the certainty in her voice told me this wasn't some misunderstanding. The smirk on her face never wavered. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they know they have the upper hand. When they know they've already won. And in that moment I realized, as the blood drained from my face, that she was not here to explain herself. No, she was here to stake her claim. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. My mouth felt dry, and my heart hammered in my chest, but I managed to speak. "What do you mean, new wife?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. Claire didn't hesitate. "Oh, I thought it was obvious." She gave a soft, almost amused chuckle, as if she found my confusion entertaining. "We're married. Your husband and I. He's moved on and well. I'm here to make sure you know." Her eyes flickered over me, as if appraising me, sizing me up in a way that made my stomach churn. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information. This can't be true. But her presence, the certainty in her words, left no room for doubt. This woman wasn't just anyone. She was someone who had become a part of my life, whether I liked it or not. She looked at me with cold indifference, her gaze sweeping over my home as though she was already familiar with it, already planning her place in it. The way she stood there, so self-assured, it made me feel like an outsider in my own life. I had no idea what was happening, no idea how to process the fact that my husband had married someone else without a single word to me. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. My mind couldn't catch up with the whirlwind of emotions that had suddenly overtaken me. Betrayal. Confusion. Fear. "Are you sure?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper, the question more for my own sanity than anything else. I needed to hear it again. I needed her to say it once more, just to confirm that this wasn't some horrible dream I was trapped in. Claire's eyes softened just a fraction. But that was all the confirmation I needed. The look on her face told me everything. She wasn't lying. With a slight tilt of her head, she answered, "Yes, I'm sure. We're married now. And I thought you should know because, well, you're not in the picture anymore." The finality in her words echoed in my mind, reverberating against the walls of my heart. I staggered back, my hand gripping the doorframe to steady myself. I had never imagined anything like this would happen. I had never thought in a million years that my marriage, the life I thought was solid, would be torn apart so easily. By her. Stranger. I looked at her again, trying to understand, but there was nothing left to understand. She was here for one thing, to let me know that I was no longer needed in my own life. I stood there, staring at Claire as if I were in a trance. The weight of her words pressed down on me, each one a hammer hitting my chest. New wife. I couldn't believe it. My mind couldn't make sense of the information, and yet her presence, her smug smile, her flawless confidence, told me that this was no joke. I needed to ask more questions, but the words felt stuck in my throat. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. It was as though my body had betrayed me, frozen in place, unable to move or think clearly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why, how, and for how long. But all that escaped me was a single, shaky breath. Claire took a step closer, her heels clicking on the floor with each move. The sound echoed in the silence, sharp and calculated, almost like she was marching toward her victory. She was in control now, and I, in this moment, was powerless. "Don't worry," she continued, her voice dripping with a false sweetness. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just thought you should know that your husband is no longer yours. He chose me." She let out a small, satisfied laugh, as if the entire thing were some joke that I wasn't in on. Her eyes scanned me once more, lingering on my face, taking in my shock, my pain, the confusion written all over my features. She must have enjoyed it, watching me unravel before her. Her gaze then slid to the house behind me, as though she were assessing her territory. She didn't even seem to notice how much this was hurting me. Or maybe she didn't care. "Things change," she added casually, as if she were discussing something trivial. "Your life, his life, everything. We're going to be living here now. He's made his decision. And I think it's time you accepted that." I felt a wave of dizziness, as if the room were spinning around me. I shook my head, hoping the world would stop turning long enough for me to understand what was happening. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But the truth was staring me in the face, as sharp and as cruel as a knife. Claire's words continued to echo in my mind. "We're going to be living here now." I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my brain. What did she mean? Was she really going to move into our home? How could she? How could he let this happen? But why? The question finally escaped my lips, raw and broken. My voice was shaky, filled with pain, but I needed to understand. How could he do this to me? To us? Claire's expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened, her smugness turning to something more steely, more deliberate. "People change," she said. "Your husband was never happy with you. He just needed someone who would make him feel alive again. I guess I did that." Her words hit me like a slap to the face, cold and harsh. He was never happy with me. I felt a knot form in my throat, tears threatening to spill. I had tried so hard to make our marriage work. I had been there for him through thick and thin, supporting him, loving him with everything I had. And yet this woman, a stranger, had somehow stepped into my life and replaced everything I thought was secure. A bitter laugh escaped her lips as if she could read the pain in my eyes. "You know, it's funny," she said, her voice turning mockingly sweet. "You probably thought you were the only one who mattered to him. But the truth is, you've been living in a fantasy. He wanted something else. Someone who could give him what you couldn't." Her words sliced through me, each sentence a cruel reminder of everything I had failed to see. I thought I knew him, thought I understood him. But now, with every word she spoke, it was clear that I had been blind, that I had been living in a dream while everything around me had been crumbling. I could feel my legs weaken, my body trembling as the weight of everything settled in. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to defend myself, how to make sense of this. I had loved him so much, and now I was left with nothing. Claire took another step closer, her gaze sharp and calculating. She studied me, as if I were a mere obstacle to be removed. There was no empathy, no understanding in her eyes. She didn't care that I was hurting. She didn't care about the years I had invested in this marriage. All that mattered to her was that she had won. "Look," she said with a slight shrug, as if the whole situation were beneath her. "I'm not here to fight. I'm just here to inform you. He chose me. I'm his future now." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before adding with that same smug smile, "And I'll be the one by his side, not you." I stood there, unable to speak, unable to move. The world around me felt like it was crumbling, but Claire wasn't finished. No, she wasn't just here to inform me. She was here to remind me of my place, to make sure I understood that I was nothing more than a chapter in the past. A chapter that was now over. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Claire's words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and with each passing second, they seemed to grow even more suffocating. "I'm his future now." Those words echoed in my mind, repeating over and over, each time sending a fresh wave of pain through my chest. It felt like a cruel mantra, and I couldn't escape it. I wanted to yell. I wanted to scream at her, to demand that she leave, to tell her that she didn't belong here. This house was mine, my home. It had been the place where I built my life, my dreams, with the man I loved. But now, in front of me stood a woman who was claiming it all, claiming him like everything I had done for all these years meant nothing. But I couldn't. My throat was tight, and the words wouldn't come. It felt as though I had been paralyzed by the sheer audacity of her presence. Every part of me screamed in protest, but I was frozen, standing there like a stranger in my own home. Claire, seeing that I was struggling to find a response, took a step closer, the click of her heels on the floor piercing through the silence. She looked me up and down with a sense of superiority, as though she were inspecting something beneath her, something that no longer had any worth. I wanted to tell her to stop, to tell her that she didn't know what she was talking about, that she didn't know me, or my marriage, or anything about the love I had poured into that relationship. But I couldn't. Her presence, her casual arrogance, had already taken that away from me. She had already claimed her victory, and I was too stunned to fight back. "You know," she continued, her voice oozing with condescension, "I never understood how you could stay with him for so long and pretend everything was fine. It's almost sad, really." She leaned in slightly, her words soft and calculated, like a knife being twisted into an open wound. "But I guess you've got to live with your choices, don't you? Just like I'll have to live with mine." Her words were like daggers, each one cutting deeper into my soul. I had never imagined that the woman who would destroy my life would be so cold, so unapologetic. She wasn't just here to inform me about her new place in my life. She was here to rub it in, to make sure I understood just how little I mattered now, how easily I had been replaced. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. I wanted to run away, to escape, but I couldn't move. I couldn't leave. I was trapped in this moment, trapped in the reality of what was happening. Claire smiled again, that same smug, greedy smile that seemed to mock everything I had ever believed in. "Don't worry," she said, as if speaking to a child. "You'll be fine. You'll move on just like he did." She stepped back, giving me one last look. "I'm sure you'll find someone else. Everyone does eventually." The finality in her tone, the way she spoke as if it were all a foregone conclusion, made my heart sink even further. As if my pain was something so insignificant that she could dismiss it with a wave of her hand. She wasn't just taking my place in his life. She was erasing my entire existence, as if it had never mattered. She paused, looking me over one last time, making sure I understood her message. "I'll leave you to think about everything," she said, turning to walk away. "I'm sure you have a lot to process." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked away, her footsteps fading into the distance. I stood in the doorway, unable to move, unable to speak, as if the world had stopped moving around me. I didn't know how long I stood there. Minutes. Hours. Time seemed to lose all meaning in that moment. I could still hear her words ringing in my ears, the cruel finality of her presence lingering in the air like a thick fog. And in that fog I was left standing alone, the remnants of my life. My marriage, my future, shattered before me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the door hanging open as though it had been left ajar for a reason. But there was no escape. No way to close the door on the truth that Claire had just shoved into my face. My mind was in a whirlwind, trying desperately to comprehend what had just happened. "Your husband's new wife." The words repeated, taunting me. I couldn't stop thinking about them. I kept imagining my husband, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, standing before her, smiling, promising her everything that was once mine. A sickening feeling twisted in my gut. Had he truly been unhappy all this time? Was I so blind that I missed the cracks in our marriage? My heart ached with the weight of her words, but there was one thing I needed to know. I needed to hear it from him. I needed to understand why. Why had he done this to me? Why hadn't he said anything? The pain, the anger, all of it boiled inside me, urging me to pick up the phone and confront him, to demand the truth from him. But before I could make the call, the phone rang, its sharp tone breaking through my spiraling thoughts. My heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, I grabbed the phone, hoping that it was him. Hoping that somehow he had sensed my pain, that he was about to make everything right. But when I looked at the screen, my stomach dropped. It wasn't him. It was Claire. I hesitated for a second before answering, my hand trembling. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold, though I couldn't hide the tremor beneath it. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, as if nothing had happened. "I just thought I'd let you know he's going to be home soon," she said casually. "You'll be seeing him, I'm sure." I clenched my jaw, every word she spoke fueling the fire that was already burning inside me. "Why are you calling me?" I demanded, my patience thinning. "What do you want from me?" There was a pause on the other end before she answered, her voice dripping with amusement. "Oh, I don't want anything from you. I just thought you might want to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm his wife now, and that means I'm here to stay." The words hit me like a slap, cold and final. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that she didn't have a right to call me, that she had no place in my life. But somehow I held back. The truth was, I wasn't angry with her. I was angry with him. Angry that he had let this happen, that he had thrown away everything we had built for something or someone else. "I just wanted to make sure you understood," she added, as if she were speaking to a child. "You don't need to worry about him anymore. He's mine now. I think it's time you accepted that." Her words were like poison, each syllable twisting the knife further into my heart. She wasn't even trying to be kind, to offer any comfort. She was enjoying this, enjoying watching me unravel, as if it were some game to her. With a final, smug laugh, she ended the call. I stood there, staring at the screen, my mind a blur of thoughts, emotions, and anger. But beneath it all, there was one question that still lingered: why? Why had he done this? Why hadn't he come to me, explained everything, given me a chance to fight for what we had? What was so wrong with me that he had chosen her over me? I couldn't wait any longer. I needed answers. I needed to confront him. My hands shook as I dialed his number, praying that he would pick up, praying that he would give me the truth, the clarity I so desperately needed. The phone rang, and with each ring my heartbeat grew faster, louder. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, the weight of everything that was about to be revealed. Finally he answered. "Hey," he said, his voice calm, almost distant. I swallowed hard. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but filled with an emotion I could barely control. "Now." There was a brief silence on the other end before he spoke again. I don't think there's much to talk about anymore, he replied, his tone oddly cold. I felt like I had been slapped. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, was already shutting me out. But I couldn't let him get away with it. Not now, not after everything. I want to hear it from you, I said, my voice trembling with the emotions I had tried so hard to keep under control. I want to know why. There was a long pause after I asked my question, as if he was deciding how to answer, or whether he should answer at all. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could hear the sound of my own breath, shallow and frantic. The uncertainty of what was about to unfold was overwhelming, and yet I couldn't back down now. I needed to know why he had chosen her over me, why he had left everything we had behind as if it meant nothing. Why? I repeated, my voice shaky but firm. Why her? Why did you do this to me? I heard him exhale slowly, a sound that seemed to echo through the phone. It was almost like he was bracing himself for something, as if the truth was too painful for him to speak. And maybe it was. But it didn't matter. He owed me an explanation. Look, he began, his voice distant. This isn't easy for me either, but it's done. I've made my choice. His words hit me like a physical blow. Done. It was over. Just like that, he was cutting ties with me, with our life, with everything we had built. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand it. You don't get to just end it like that, I said, the frustration rising in my chest. You don't get to walk away without telling me why. I deserve to know. After everything, I deserve that much. There was a pause on the other end before he spoke again. His voice colder now, more detached. It wasn't something I planned. Just happened. I'm sorry, but I met Claire and things changed. I wasn't happy with you anymore. We were both pretending for a long time. I needed something different. The words were so blunt, so final, that it felt like he had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The pain was too much. So what? You just gave up on us. I managed to choke out, my voice breaking. Everything we had, everything we built, it meant nothing to you? I didn't want it to happen this way, he said, his tone softening just slightly. But I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living a lie. I wanted something real, something that made me feel alive again. And Claire, she made me feel that. The words stung. They were worse than any insult. I wasn't just being rejected. I was being told that everything we had shared, every moment of happiness, every struggle we overcame together, had been meaningless. All because he had met someone new who made him feel alive again. As if I hadn't tried. As if I hadn't loved him with everything I had. Is that all I was to you? A lie. I whispered, the tears starting to spill down my cheeks despite myself. He didn't answer right away. And for a moment, I wondered if he had even heard me. But then he spoke again. His voice now completely stripped of warmth. I never meant to hurt you. But I've made my decision. Claire is the person I want to be with. I felt a deep, cold emptiness fill the space between us, as though everything I had known, everything I had held onto for so long, had crumbled into dust. My world was falling apart piece by piece, and the person I had loved most in the world was the one destroying it. You couldn't even talk to me about this, I said, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. You couldn't even have the decency to be honest with me before it got this far? There was another long pause, and when he finally spoke, it was as if his voice had become a shadow of the person I had once known. I didn't know how to. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't an easy choice for me either, but it's done now. You need to accept that. The finality in his tone sent a chill down my spine. It was over. He was done. There was no room for negotiation, no room for understanding. He had made up his mind, and no matter how much I wanted to scream, no matter how much I wanted to beg him to stay, I knew it wouldn't change anything. So that's it, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. You're just going to leave me like this? Like I don't matter anymore? I could hear him sigh. I don't want to hurt you, but I can't keep living a lie. I need to be with Claire now. I need to move on. I hope you understand. I didn't understand. Couldn't. But in that moment I realized I never would. The man I thought I knew, the man I had given everything for, was gone. And in his place was a stranger who no longer cared about the life we had shared. I guess I don't have a choice, do I? I said, my voice low, resigned. You've made your choice. And now I have to make mine. With that, there was nothing left to say. I didn't want to hear his voice anymore. I didn't want to listen to any more of his excuses or apologies. I hung up the phone, the sound of the click ringing in my ears. I stood there in the silence, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me, the truth settling like a heavy stone in my chest. It's over. The words felt like poison, like a final curse that would follow me for the rest of my life. The world around me seemed to blur as I stood there in the aftermath of that devastating conversation. The house felt colder now, emptier. The walls, which had once felt like a comforting embrace, now seemed to mock me. Everything I had known, everything I had built with him, seemed to have disintegrated into nothing. I could still hear his voice in my head, the cold, emotionless way he had said those words, the finality in his tone. I need to move on. I can't keep living a lie. I didn't know how long I stood there, just staring at the floor, as if hoping that somehow, the pieces of my shattered life would fall back together if I waited long enough. But they wouldn't. I knew that. Nothing would fix this. Nothing would bring him back. The first wave of tears hit me like a flood, overwhelming and relentless. They weren't just tears of sadness or loss. They were tears of betrayal, of anger, of frustration. How could he do this? How could he just throw everything away as if it had meant nothing? As if I had meant nothing. I walked aimlessly through the house, my footsteps echoing in the silence, the only sound in the world now. The kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, each place that had once held memories of love and warmth now felt like a hollow shell. The photo frames on the mantel, the dishes in the cabinet, the clothes in the closet, all of them were reminders of a life that was no longer mine to keep. I couldn't stay here. Not with all of these memories. I needed to get away, to clear my head, to breathe. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and left the house, stepping out into the cold night air. The coolness of the evening hit me sharply, but it didn't matter. I was numb. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to escape the suffocating weight of everything. I ended up at a park near our house, a quiet place I had often visited to think, to reflect. But now, as I sat on a bench, staring out at the empty swings, I realized that I wasn't just reflecting on my past. I was grieving it. I was grieving the woman I had been before everything changed. The woman who believed in love, who believed in forever, who had trusted someone with her heart, only to have it broken beyond repair. For the first time in a long time, I let myself feel the weight of the loss. The loss of a future that would never be, the loss of someone I had loved with everything I had, the loss of the life I thought I was building. And with each sob that racked my body, I felt a little piece of myself slip away. But then, in the midst of the pain, something else stirred inside me. A small flicker of realization, a voice in the back of my mind telling me that this was not the end. That I was not defined by his betrayal, by his choice to walk away. Yes, it hurt more than anything I had ever felt before, but I was still here. I was still breathing. I wiped my tears away and looked up at the dark sky, the stars faintly visible through the cloud cover. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I had to keep going. I had to find my way back to myself. I couldn't let this break me. I couldn't let his choices, his mistakes, define my life. With a deep breath, I stood up from the bench. The world felt a little clearer now, a little less suffocating. I didn't have all the answers and I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone. Not really. I still had myself. The days following that night were a blur, each one feeling like a slow, painful walk through a fog I couldn't escape. I tried to go through the motions, getting up, going to work, eating, pretending like everything was fine. But each moment was a reminder of what I had lost, of what had been stolen from me. I spent the first few days in a haze of numbness, unable to think clearly, unable to process everything that had happened. It was as if my mind and body were in shock, refusing to acknowledge the magnitude of the betrayal. But slowly, bit by bit, I began to feel again. The grief came in waves, unpredictable and overwhelming, crashing over me when I least expected it. There were times when I wanted to scream, when I wanted to reach out and confront him, demand that he come back and make everything right. But I knew better than to believe that would ever happen. He had made his choice. And as much as it hurt, as much as it felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest, I had to accept it. I found solace in the small things, moments of peace in the chaos. I started taking walks in the evenings not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The cool night air became a comfort, a reminder that life, despite everything, was still moving forward. The stars above seemed to offer a quiet reassurance, as if to say, "You are not alone." One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the empty space across from me. The silence felt suffocating, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of the emptiness. I missed him, his presence, his laugh, the way we used to talk about everything and nothing. I missed the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared. But in the silence, I also realized something. I was still here. I was still breathing. And I had the power to rebuild. That night I started writing again. Writing had always been a form of therapy for me, a way to express the feelings I couldn't put into words. I began to write about everything. My pain, my anger, my confusion. I wrote about the woman I was, the woman I had been, and the woman I was becoming. The process wasn't easy, and there were times when the tears blurred the words on the page, but it felt like I was taking back a little bit of control. It was my story now, and I could rewrite it however I chose. Over the next few weeks, I found new strength within myself. I joined a support group, where I met others who had experienced similar heartache. Hearing their stories, sharing my own, helped me realize that I wasn't the only one who had been hurt, that this pain, as overwhelming as it was something that could be survived. We were all finding our way back from the wreckage, one step at a time. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the weight of the betrayal felt too heavy to bear. There were times when I missed him so much it physically hurt. But each day I grew a little stronger. I began to remember who I was before him. A woman who had dreams, a woman who was independent, a woman who deserved more than what he had given her. One evening, as I was walking through the park again, something shifted inside me. I no longer felt like the broken woman who had been left behind. I felt like someone who had found her footing again, someone who was slowly piecing her life back together. The future still seemed uncertain, but for the first time in a long time I felt like I had the power to shape it. I didn't need him to feel complete. I didn't need his approval, his love, or his presence to be whole. I had myself. And that was enough. As I walked back home that evening, I felt lighter. The path ahead was still unclear, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready to move forward. I was ready to live again. And though I would always carry the scars of this betrayal, I knew they would eventually fade, replaced by the strength I had found within myself. It would take time, but I would rebuild my life. Piece by piece. Time, they say, is the greatest healer. But I had always been skeptical of that notion. How could time heal a wound so deep, a scar so permanent? How could time erase the betrayal, the hurt, the abandonment? But now, as the weeks turned into months, I began to understand. It wasn't that time magically healed everything. It was that, with time, I had learned how to live with the pain. I had learned to take it in stride, to accept it as part of my journey, and to keep moving forward despite it. I was no longer the woman who had waited for him to come back, who had clung to memories that only served to hold me back. I had stopped looking at the past and had begun to focus on the present, on what I could control, on what I could build for myself. The future was still uncertain, but I had stopped fearing it. Instead, I embraced it, knowing that whatever it held, I had the strength to face it. It wasn't easy. There were days when the grief would sneak up on me like an unwelcome visitor, reminding me of the life I had lost, of the dreams that had shattered. I would find myself alone in the quiet, feeling that old ache in my chest, the emptiness that he had left behind. But now, instead of sinking into despair, I let myself feel the pain for what it was, a passing storm, something that would eventually move on. I had learned the importance of self-care, of taking the time to nurture myself, to do the things that made me happy. I spent more time with friends, with people who lifted me up, who reminded me of who I was before everything fell apart. I found joy in the little things, in a cup of coffee in the morning, in the sound of laughter, in the beauty of the world around me. I realized that I didn't need him to make my life complete. I was already whole. One day, as I sat at the park once more, I realized how far I had come. The girl who had once been consumed by heartbreak, who had cried herself to sleep every night, was no longer the same. She had transformed. She had become stronger, wiser, more resilient. I had learned to trust myself again, to trust that I was capable of handling whatever life threw my way. The most surprising thing of all was that, over time, I began to feel gratitude for the journey. It had been painful, yes, but it had also been transformative. The person I had become was not someone I would have recognized at the beginning of this ordeal. I had discovered a strength in myself that I never knew existed. I had learned to let go of the past, to accept what had happened, and to move forward with grace. And then, one day, as if the universe had decided it was time, I met someone new. It wasn't anything grand, nothing dramatic. We met by chance at a mutual friends gathering, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something. Not the kind of love I had once known, but something different, something new. Something that reminded me that there was still beauty to be found in the world, even after all the heartbreak. He was kind, patient, and understanding. He didn't try to fix me, didn't try to erase my past. He simply accepted me for who I was, a woman who had been through a lot, but who was still learning, still growing, still healing. And that was enough. For the first time, I allowed myself to open up again, to trust that maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who could love me the way I deserved. But this time, I wasn't looking for someone to complete me. I was whole on my own. I simply wanted someone to share my life with, to build something new, to create new memories that would make the old ones fade into the background. As I looked back at the path I had traveled, I realized that I had learned one of the most important lessons of all. That I was enough. That my worth was not defined by someone else's love or approval, but by my own love for myself. The road to healing had been long, and at times it had felt impossible. But I had made it. I had found my way back to myself, and I was stronger for it. And so, as I walked into the future, I did so with my head held high, ready for whatever it had in store for me. I knew that the past would always be a part of me, but it no longer controlled me. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. As the months passed, I grew more comfortable in my own skin. The person I had been when he was still a part of my life seemed like a distant memory, almost as though she were someone else entirely. I no longer mourned the woman I had been, because I had finally accepted that I couldn't go back to her. She had been shaped by love, yes, but also by illusions, by expectations that had not been met. In her place was a stronger version of me, one who had learned the hard way that love couldn't be forced, that some things were simply out of our control. I had learned to stop holding on to what wasn't meant for me, to stop chasing something that had already slipped away. I still thought of him, of course. There were days when I would catch myself wondering how he was, what he was doing, and if he ever thought about me. I would replay the memories, but instead of the heartbreak they once caused, I felt a quiet acceptance. He had been a part of my life, yes, but he was not my whole life. And that was okay. One day, as I was going through some old things, I came across a box of keepsakes I had stored away. Photographs, letters, gifts, and mementos from our time together. For a moment I hesitated, unsure if I should even open it. But curiosity won out, and I began sifting through the contents. There were moments of happiness frozen in time, smiles captured in photographs, words of love written in old letters. But as I looked at each piece, something inside me shifted. The memories no longer felt heavy. They no longer pulled me back into a past I couldn't change. Instead, they felt like what they truly were, pieces of a chapter that had ended. I didn't need them to define me. I didn't need them to keep me tethered to a time that was over. With a quiet sense of peace, I closed the box and placed it on the shelf. It was time to let go. Not because I didn't care, but because I realized that holding on was preventing me from moving forward. It was time to make space for new memories, new experiences, and new possibilities. The process of letting go wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't something I could just decide to do and expect it to be easy. But each day I took small steps. I cleared out the clutter both physically and emotionally. I started donating clothes that no longer fit the person I was becoming. I deleted old messages, and I stopped checking his social media. Each small act of letting go was a quiet act of reclaiming my life. As I let go of the past, I began to see the future with clearer eyes. I could feel the weight lifting, not because the pain was gone, but because I had accepted that the future held more for me than what I had left behind. I wasn't waiting for something to happen. I was making it happen. I was writing my own story now, one where I was the hero, one where I controlled the narrative. It was during this time of rediscovery that I began to feel the stirrings of something new. Not with anyone else, but within myself. There was a freedom in knowing that I was no longer defined by my past, no longer shackled by a love that had faded. There was a deep sense of gratitude for the woman I had become, for the lessons I had learned, and for the strength I had found in the most unlikely of places. I had spent so many years trying to hold on to something that was never meant to last. But in doing so, I had lost sight of the most important thing, myself. Now that I had found my way back to me, I knew I would never lose myself again. It was time to live for me. To do the things I had always dreamed of. To travel, to explore, to create, and to grow. The world was full of opportunities, and I was ready to embrace them. And so, I let go. Let go of the past, let go of the hurt, let go of the hope that things could have turned out differently. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. With each passing day, I grew stronger. With each passing day, I became more comfortable in my own skin. I had found peace, and I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. On a journey that was just beginning. The days became a blur of new experiences, each one adding a new layer to my transformation. I had shed the skin of the woman who had been consumed by grief, and I was beginning to emerge as someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who had learned how to be at peace with her past, without allowing it to define her future. The woman I had become was independent, focused on her own growth and happiness. I began exploring new passions, things I had put on hold for so long. I rediscovered my love for painting, something I had loved to do before the chaos of my marriage. The brushstrokes on the canvas felt like a release, an expression of everything I had kept locked inside for so long. I started traveling more, not for anyone else but for me. The world felt vast and full of possibilities, and I wanted to experience as much of it as I could. I visited new cities, explored unfamiliar cultures, and allowed myself to breathe in the freedom I had been craving. Every trip, every new adventure, added to the sense of wholeness I was building within myself. But perhaps the most surprising development was that, as I opened myself up to the world again, I began to realize that love wasn't something I needed to search for. It was something that would come in its own time, in its own way. I had spent so many years trying to force something that wasn't meant to be. But now, I knew that the right kind of love couldn't be rushed. It would find me when I was ready, when I had learned to love myself fully. There were still moments of doubt, of course. I would catch myself wondering if I was really moving forward, if I was truly over everything that had happened. But then I would look around at the life I was building and realize that the answer was right in front of me. I had rebuilt myself, not out of necessity, but out of choice. I had chosen to rise above the pain, to become a version of myself that I could be proud of. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for everything I had gone through. Gratitude for the pain, the heartbreak, and the lessons they had taught me. Without them, I would never have become the person I was today. I had found a peace within myself that I never thought possible, and it felt like the beginning of something incredible. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I continued to grow. I found strength in being alone, not because I feared solitude, but because I had learned to cherish it. I had learned to enjoy my own company, to listen to my own thoughts, and to trust myself. I no longer needed someone else to complete me. I was already whole. It was then that I realized how far I had come. The woman who had once stood at the threshold of despair, waiting for a love that would never return, was now a woman who had embraced her independence, her power, and her future. She had learned that love, true love, started with herself, and everything else would follow. The future, once a source of fear, now felt like an open road, one that was mine to travel at my own pace on my own terms. And with that, I understood that the greatest journey of all wasn't one of destination, but one of self-discovery, healing, and growth. I had come to know myself in ways I never thought possible, and I was excited to continue the journey ahead. In that moment, I knew that I had not only survived but thrived. The story of my past, with all its twists and turns, had shaped me into the woman I was meant to be. And now it was time to write the next chapter. A chapter that was mine to create. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, life reminded me that the road to healing wasn't always a straight path. It was a winding journey, filled with unexpected turns, detours, and surprises. But somehow, I had come to accept that the unexpected was part of the beauty of life. It was in the unplanned moments that I found growth, self-discovery, and occasionally joy. One afternoon, while I was at the art gallery showcasing some of my work, I bumped into someone I hadn't expected to see. It was someone from my past. Not him, but someone just as significant. It was a former friend, a person I had lost touch with during the years when I was consumed by my marriage, and later by the heartache that followed. Seeing her again was like opening a forgotten chapter of my life. Her name was Sarah. We had been inseparable in college, sharing dreams, fears, and even silly secrets. But as life often does, our paths had diverged. She had moved away for work, and I had stayed, trying to hold on to a relationship that I thought defined me. The reunion was both awkward and comforting. There was a hesitance in our conversation, like two people who had once known each other deeply but were now strangers. We exchanged pleasantries, but there was an undercurrent of something unspoken, the realization that so much time had passed and so much had changed. Yet as we talked, something clicked. It was as if we were able to pick up where we had left off, no longer the versions of ourselves we once were, but versions that had evolved. We shared stories of our respective journeys, of the trials and tribulations we had both faced in the years we had been apart. It turned out that she, too, had gone through her own heartache, her own struggles. It was a strange comfort to know that I wasn't the only one who had endured pain. I wasn't alone in the process of rebuilding, and hearing her story reminded me that everyone had their own battles to fight. Life wasn't just about the happy moments, it was about finding strength in the difficult ones, too. By the end of our conversation, Sarah invited me to catch up properly over dinner. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I was ready to delve into the past, but then I realized that meeting her was not just about reconnecting with an old friend. It was about reconnecting with a part of myself that had been lost in the chaos of the years before. I agreed and we set a date. The dinner was everything I had hoped for and more. We laughed, reminisced about our college days, and shared the struggles we had faced since then. It felt so natural, so easy to be around someone who had known me before the pain. It was like a breath of fresh air, a reminder that not all relationships were tainted by disappointment and loss. Some, like this one, could survive the tests of time. As the evening wore on, I began to realize something important. The process of healing wasn't just about moving on from one person or one experience. It was about opening myself up to the possibility of new connections, new friendships, and new experiences. It was about letting the past shape me, but not letting it define my future. I had spent so many years closing myself off, so many years convinced that the love I had lost was the only love worth having. But now, I understood that there was so much more to life than romantic love. There was friendship, there was self-love, and there were endless opportunities for growth. Over the following weeks, Sarah and I spent more time together, and I began to realize just how much I had missed out on by isolating myself. There was so much more to the world than the small bubble I had been living in. My connection with her reminded me of the importance of nurturing the relationships that mattered, the ones that filled me with positivity, joy, and inspiration. But it wasn't just Sarah who opened my eyes to this new chapter. It was the realization that life wasn't over after a heartbreak. In fact, it was just beginning. I had spent so much time mourning the life I had lost that I had forgotten about the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. I had been so focused on a past love that I had neglected the many ways love could appear in my life. I wasn't sure where this new phase would take me, but I was ready for it. I had learned that healing wasn't a linear process. There would be setbacks, unexpected moments of vulnerability, and days when I felt like I hadn't come as far as I thought. But there would also be moments of triumph, of joy, and of connection. There would be more dinners with old friends, more journeys of self-discovery, and more love. Not the kind that defined me, but the kind that reminded me of the beauty in life's unpredictability. As I moved forward, I promised myself one thing: that I would never stop being open to life, to people, to love in all its forms. I wasn't afraid anymore. The road ahead might be uncertain, but it was mine to travel, and I was no longer afraid of the twists and turns. It had been a few months since that dinner with Sarah, and with each passing day, I found myself embracing the future more and more. The past still lingered in the corners of my mind, but it no longer held the power it once did. I had grown beyond it, beyond the hurt, beyond the pain that had once consumed me. The journey I had embarked on after everything fell apart had been one of healing, self-discovery, and growth. And yet, as life has a funny way of doing, it still had a few surprises in store for me. One of those surprises came in the form of a phone call. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me I should answer. My heart raced as I picked up the phone, unsure of what to expect. "Hello. Is this Emily?" The voice on the other end sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. "Yes, this is she. This is Rachel. I'm James' wife." The words hit me like a wave, crashing into my chest, stealing the air from my lungs. It was the last person I had ever expected to hear from. For a brief moment I couldn't speak. My mind raced, and I felt a chill spread through my body. Rachel, James' new wife, was the last person I ever thought would contact me. Our worlds had been so completely separate, so far removed from each other that I couldn't fathom what she wanted from me. "Is everything okay?" I finally managed to ask, my voice shaking slightly. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I'm sorry to call you out of the blue like this. I know it might seem strange, but I've been doing a lot of thinking and I think it's time we talk." I didn't know what to make of it. My first instinct was to refuse, to hang up the phone and walk away from whatever this was. But something within me urged me to hear her out. I had been through so much and I had come so far in my healing. Maybe this was a step I needed to take, a way to truly close the door on the past once and for all. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "What is it that you want to talk about?" Rachel took a moment before responding, as if trying to find the right words. "I know you probably have a lot of anger and resentment towards me and James. And I get it. Do. But I wanted you to hear my side of things. I want you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen. I never wanted to be the one who came between you and James." Her words, though unexpected, were surprisingly sincere. I didn't know if I should feel angry, betrayed, or something else entirely. Part of me wanted to shout at her, to tell her how much she had hurt me. But I didn't. Instead, I listened as she continued. "I didn't know about your relationship with James until after he left you. I'm not trying to make excuses, and I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just needed to tell you that I never wanted to be the cause of your pain. I know I'm not the one you blame, but I thought you should know the truth." I sat in silence for a moment, processing everything she had just said. It was hard to believe. After all, I had spent so long imagining the worst, blaming her, blaming James, blaming the situation itself. But hearing her words, hearing her genuine remorse, made me realize something important. She too had been a part of this tangled web. She wasn't the enemy I had painted her to be. She was just another person caught in the fallout of something that had fallen apart long before any of us could have predicted. "I appreciate you reaching out," I said finally, my voice steady now. "It means something to me that you wanted to explain things. But I've come to terms with everything. I've let go of the past, and I'm not looking to reopen old wounds. I just want peace. I want to move forward. Rachel was quiet for a moment. I understand. And I don't want to make things harder for you. I just thought you deserved the truth. And I hope you can find it in your heart to let go of any anger you may have towards me. I could hear the sincerity in her voice. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of closure. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about her or James. It was about me. It was about healing the last remaining piece of myself that I had unknowingly held on to. The resentment, the anger, it was all gone. It no longer had a place in my heart. I had spent so many years giving power to the past, but now I was free. I will, I said, my voice firm yet gentle. I already have. And with that we ended the conversation. I sat in my living room, the weight of the call settling over me like a heavy blanket. For the first time I realized just how far I had come. Not just in terms of letting go of James, but in letting go of everything that had bound me to that time. I was free. Truly free. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the conversation, on the journey I had taken to get to this point. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't always been smooth. But I had made it. I had found peace not because everything had worked out perfectly, but because I had learned to accept it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I had embraced the lessons, and in doing so I had embraced myself. Now I was ready for whatever came next. I was ready for the future, for new experiences, new relationships, and a new life that was entirely mine to create. The days that followed the phone call were filled with a surprising sense of calm. For the first time in years I felt truly at peace. The weight I had carried for so long seemed to have lifted, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe without the constant reminder of the past hanging over me. It was as though the phone call had been the final piece in a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was still putting together. In the weeks after, I focused even more on my personal growth. I immersed myself in my work, spending hours painting and refining my skills. I joined local art exhibitions and started building a network of like-minded individuals who shared my passion for creativity. The gallery was no longer just a place to showcase my work. It was a community where I felt at home, where my passion was nurtured and respected. But even as I flourished in my art and found fulfillment in my career, I felt a deep desire for something more. I had spent so much time alone, learning to enjoy my own company, but now I found myself yearning for deeper connections. I didn't need anyone to complete me, but I longed for companionship. Someone who could understand me, share in my journey, and walk beside me as I continued to evolve. It wasn't long before I met someone who seemed to align with that desire. His name was Mark. He was a fellow artist, someone I had met at one of the gallery events. He was kind, thoughtful, and had an air of calm confidence that drew me in. He didn't rush things, didn't try to impress me with grand gestures. Instead, he simply enjoyed my company as I did his. At first, I resisted the idea of diving into a relationship. I had been hurt before, and I was still wary of letting someone get too close. But Mark was different. He never pushed. He respected my boundaries and gave me the space I needed. Slowly, I began to open up to him, and the more I did, the more I realized how deeply I was connecting with him. We began spending more time together, sharing our dreams and fears, our hopes and disappointments. Mark was understanding, never judgmental, and somehow we seemed to complement each other perfectly. I found myself laughing more, enjoying life in ways I hadn't in years. He made me feel safe not by offering me empty promises, but by simply being there, steadfast, supportive, and genuine. As the months passed, my relationship with Mark grew. It wasn't just a romantic connection. It was a partnership, a bond based on mutual respect, shared values, and understanding. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had found someone who truly saw me, not as a broken person trying to piece herself back together, but as a woman who had been through challenges and emerged stronger. Mark accepted me for who I was, without any pretense, and that acceptance was something I had never truly known before. But even as I embraced this new relationship, there was still a lingering question in my mind. Was I truly ready to let someone in completely? Was I truly ready to love again, without the baggage of my past weighing me down? One evening, as we sat on the rooftop of my apartment, the city lights twinkling below us, I asked Mark that very question. "Do you ever wonder if you're ready to truly love someone again?" I asked, my voice soft, almost hesitant. Mark turned to me, his eyes searching mine as if trying to understand the depth of my question. After a moment of silence, he smiled gently. "I think we're always ready to love," he said. "We just have to be willing to trust that the love we give is enough, and that the love we receive is genuine. We all have baggage, but it's how we choose to carry it that matters." His words resonated with me deeply. I realized that love wasn't about finding someone who was perfect. It wasn't about expecting another person to heal you or fill the emptiness within you. Love was about two people choosing to walk beside each other, accepting each other's flaws and imperfections, and growing together. I didn't need to hold on to the pain anymore. I didn't need to carry the weight of the past with me any longer. I had grown. I had healed. And now I could love freely, without fear of repeating old mistakes or carrying old wounds. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about acknowledging it, learning from it, and choosing to move forward. In the months that followed, Mark and I continued to build our relationship. We traveled together, explored new places, and created memories that were our own. I found myself not only falling in love with him but with life itself. I had rediscovered the joy of living, of experiencing the world with open eyes and an open heart. As I looked back on my journey, I realized how far I had come. I had transformed from a woman weighed down by grief and loss into someone who had embraced her own strength and power. I had learned that happiness wasn't something that could be found in another person. It was something I had to find within myself. Mark and I grew together, and the love we shared became something beautiful, something I had never expected to experience. It wasn't the kind of love that swept me off my feet or promised me an easy life. It was the kind of love that stood the test of time, that weathered storms, and that grew stronger with each passing day. And as I continued to walk this new path, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer afraid of the future. It was mine to shape, mine to live, and I was ready to embrace it, whatever it may bring. The days and months that followed were filled with a sense of peace and fulfillment that I had never known before. Mark and I continued to grow together, learning from one another and strengthening our bond. I had come to realize that love, in its truest form, was not about perfection. It was about accepting imperfections, forgiving mistakes, and growing together through life's challenges. But there was something more profound that I had discovered within myself. A sense of purpose. The pain from the past, the hurt I had endured, had led me to a deeper understanding of who I was and what I truly wanted in life. I wasn't just healing, I was thriving. I had always been passionate about art, but now I saw it in a different light. It was more than just a hobby or career. It had become a form of self-expression, a way to communicate my journey with the world. I started exploring new techniques, experimenting with different mediums, and even began hosting my own art workshops. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about sharing the healing power of creativity with others. The gallery that had once felt like a place to prove myself had become a sanctuary where I could express my thoughts, my feelings, and my story. The workshops were a success, and they brought me closer to a community of people who were also seeking healing, understanding, and connection through art. It felt good to know that I wasn't alone in my journey, that others, too, were learning to express themselves and find their way through their own struggles. I had finally found a sense of purpose that gave me peace, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to look for answers outside of myself. But as much as I had grown, there was still one chapter that needed to be closed. The past, though no longer a burden, still lingered in the back of my mind. James and Rachel had both faded from my daily thoughts, but there were still unresolved emotions. I had forgiven them, but I had never truly forgiven myself for how much of my own happiness I had given up for the sake of others. It wasn't until a late evening, while I was sitting on my balcony watching the sunset, that I realized what I needed to do. I needed to let go completely, not of the memories but of the power they held over me. I had spent so many years holding on to the pain, believing that somehow it was a part of me. But it wasn't. It was just something that had happened to me. It wasn't who I was. The next day, I reached out to an old friend who had been there for me when everything fell apart. Sarah. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but I knew that if there was anyone who would understand, it would be her. She had always been my sounding board, the one who would listen without judgment and offer wisdom without expectation. "I think I'm finally ready to let go," I told her when she answered the phone. "Not just of James and Rachel, but of everything that held me back." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm so proud of you, Emily. You've come a long way. But remember, letting go isn't about erasing the past. It's about giving yourself the freedom to move forward without the weight of it holding you back." Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. I had spent so long fearing the future, unsure if I would ever truly be free of the past. But now, I understood that letting go wasn't about erasing my history. It was about choosing not to let it define me. It was about accepting my story, the good and the bad, and finding the strength to move forward with grace. I called Mark later that evening to talk about everything that had been on my mind. He listened intently, offering me the space I needed to express myself. "You've come so far, Emily," he said softly. "You've always had the strength to move forward. Now it's just about accepting that strength and owning it." With his encouragement, I finally found the courage to take the final step in my healing. I returned to the places that had once been filled with pain, the spots I had avoided, the memories I had suppressed. I stood in those spaces, no longer running from them, but embracing them as part of my journey. I had learned that the past was no longer a prison. It was a lesson. I didn't need to carry it with me anymore. I had become the woman I was always meant to be, not defined by my past, but shaped by it. I was not broken. I was whole, and I was ready for everything that was coming next. In the months that followed, Mark and I began to talk about our future together. It wasn't about rushing into anything, it was about creating something real, something lasting. We knew that life wasn't perfect, but we were willing to face it together. We dreamed about building a life where love, creativity, and fulfillment would always be at the forefront. We talked about the possibility of moving to a new city, one where we could start fresh, build new memories, and continue to grow together. I didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time I wasn't afraid. I was ready. I was ready for love, for new experiences, for growth. I was ready to step into a new chapter with an open heart, knowing that whatever came my way, I could handle it. And so, I embraced the future, unafraid, unashamed, and fully aware that the story I had lived so far was only the beginning.